Yo, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back in. So, real quick before I get into the video, I just want to address the fact that I haven't been uploading the past few days. The reason why is because I currently have a dislocated shoulder, or I dislocated my shoulder, and I'm currently recovering from it. I'm in a sling, and I can't really use my left hand at all, or my left arm at all. So I'm kind of like currently in this weird spot where I can't really play. The background footage you'll see is going to be me. It's going to be a bunch of weird, wacky cams, but it's going to be me from stream. I've been playing Killer one-handed. I've bound a bunch of movement keys to my mouse, and I've basically been playing one-handed, but it makes it really hard to make videos, so just kind of bear with me while I recover. I may be uploading a little bit less, but I'm still around, I promise. During the recovery process, though, I might also make more videos like this one where I kind of just talk about things as opposed to actually playing, so get ready to hear a lot of my annoying opinions, I guess. But in this video, I want to address Nurse, because this seems to be a big thing that people are discussing lately. Nurse has been like this really, really big hot topic kind of out of nowhere, I feel like, because I feel like Nurse has been in the game and she's kind of been like very similar, if not maybe even stronger in the past to what she is now, and it seems like she is all of a sudden getting a lot of attention and people are complaining about her a lot, which is kind of interesting, so I think it's worth maybe talking about a little. So it seems like kind of, again, to me, seems like kind of out of nowhere, because this has been a thing in the game for a long time, but it seems like people are now really, really upset about the Nurse's strength and that she's way too strong and that she's overpowered and that she needs to be nerfed and yada, 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 which, don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm saying yada, 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 but they're not wrong. I mean, I think Nurse is really, really strong and pretty much OP, but it's also like she's been like that forever. Like, she's been like that since her release. There's never been a point in time in DBD ever where Nurse wasn't the strongest killer in the game. So I find it very strange that it's very, like, such a very hot topic right now. But I also guess maybe it's because people are playing her more. Maybe she's just becoming more popular. But I mean, yeah, Nurse is a killer that can basically just ignore all the mechanics of the game. She doesn't really give a shit about pallets or windows or anything, really. And she's one of the only killers in the game that are completely like that. She might be the only killer in the game that's completely like that. Even the other killers that are insanely strong, like Blight and Spirit, they at least will get pallet stunned. And like windows and pallets at least offer at least somewhat of a sense of safety against them. Even though some of them like Blight can do some pretty crazy things around them, for the most part, pallets are at least somewhat safe areas. Whereas against Nurse, there's literally nothing. There's nothing or nowhere that's safe. On top of that, her counterplay is basically non-existent. I mean, she does have counterplay in the sense that if the Nurse is not really, really, really skilled, then you can kind of like mess her up, right? Like if the Nurse isn't basically like a god tier super good Nurse, there's definitely things you can do, like mind games, like breaking line of sight, doubling back, playing unpredictably, that can make it a little bit harder for them to get their blink hits on you. You can maybe make them mess up a couple series of blink hits and maybe buy a little bit more time in chase than you normally would. However, if the Nurse gets good enough, even that won't work. Like a really, really god tier Nurse will hit you no matter what. It doesn't matter how good or bad of a survivor you are, you're going to get hit, guaranteed. Now, this is kind of a weird thing, and I hate to even say that because a lot of people will take content creators or skilled players saying that, and they'll just assume that every single Nurse they're going against is like a god tier Nurse that can't be juked, when in reality, I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys are going against Nurses that are probably jukeable, right? I don't think every single Nurse that plays the game is some god tiered unjukable god Nurse that where you can't do anything against them. I would say the vast majority of Nurses are at a level where even if they're very difficult to beat, they probably can at least be, you know, juked a little. Even if you make them miss a few series of blinks in a row, is enough to buy your team a lot of times, and it's pretty much the equivalent of looping any other killer. But that still doesn't change the fact that if you get good enough at Nurse, you are literally unstoppable. Like, the survivor basically can do nothing but choose a direction to die in. They just run in a certain direction and they say, hey, I choose to die in this corner of the map as opposed to the other corner of the map. It's literally all you can do, and it's kind of ridiculously absurd, especially when you combine it with a lot of other things. Like, I know Haunted Ground Retribution is a very common thing, and I've seen a clip floating around of that on Twitter that people are upset about. So it's definitely a little bit absurd. So again, don't get me wrong, I agree, Nurse is very strong. I would even say that I would go as far as to say that she's OP. I would definitely go that far. But, however, allow me to now present another side of the argument that I think is important to address, okay? So, the problem that I think a lot of people have is that when you're going against a really, really good Nurse player, it almost feels like your play doesn't matter. Because it's like, well, it doesn't matter. As long as they play well enough, we basically just lose. So, like, what's it really matter? And honestly, it's pretty understandable to be frustrated by that because it is a very frustrating feeling. And if anybody understands that feeling well, it is killer players. That scenario that I just described, where it doesn't really matter how well you play, you're going to lose as long as the other side plays correctly, is literally how like every low tier killer game feels. If you're playing a killer that's like, I don't know, if you look at like a smart content creators tier list, any killer that's like B tier and below, that's essentially how the games go. I mean, hell, even some of the killers in like A tier can feel like that sometimes. It feels like almost like what's it matter how you play, because as long as the survivors are smart and play smart, you just simply lose. So in a weird way, I almost kind of think it's a good thing to have a killer like Nurse and killers like Nurse and Blight and like those where it almost doesn't really matter how good the survivors are. You could just win no matter what, as long as you play well. And I should clarify that I mean good as in good for the game right now, considering all the other killers that feel the opposite. I think a good way for the game to be would be every single killer being a good skill matchup against the survivors, where no one really has a guaranteed win as long as they play well, and everyone kind of has to make sure they outplay the other side each game. But that's also not really realistically possible, or I mean, maybe it's possible, but it's not really realistically going to happen. But let me jump back some more again now, and maybe get back on the survivor side again, because while I do think all these things, I do still think that the killer is still overall too strong. Like, I think once you get pretty decent with her, it's pretty insane to go against, and I feel like most people are just going to have an absolutely miserable time when playing against her, and I feel like maybe something should still be done. I think Nurse can still be toned down a little bit and still be the type of killer where you win no matter what, while being a little bit less easy to do so. For instance, like right now, I think her range add-ons are absolutely absurd with how strong they are, and they can definitely be toned down. And I've also heard people suggest that they make it so that her blink hits don't count as basic attacks anymore, which I think is also a really, really good idea. I think both of those changes would tone her down a little bit and make her a little bit more bearable to go against, while not also making her feel useless to play. The basic attack thing would tone down a lot of the exposed builds that people do, things like Starstruck Agitation, as well as things like Haunting Ground Retribution, or even just like things like Make Your Choice, Devour Hope. Any of that basically gets toned down because exposed is absolutely nuts on her, and it's part of what makes her feel like so bad. It's a very like stompy, snowbally build where if you run into it, you can just kind of get 4-man slugged in like a second, and it doesn't really feel too great. And also, let's just kind of be real with ourselves. There's nothing basic about someone teleporting directly on top of you and then hitting you. I wouldn't really consider that to be a basic attack. I think this would overall put her in a more healthy state for the overall game, because I think it's important to remember, too, that even though we talked earlier about how both sides can feel helpless sometimes, we have to remember that solo queue exists for Survivor as well. It gets kind of a different story over there, because I feel like as killer, if you're on equal footing with all 4 survivors, then you're going to have a pretty good game. As survivor, if you're like a solo queue survivor, even if you're on equal footing as the killer, like if you're like the same skill, or even if you're slightly more skilled, if you have teammates that are worse than you, then sometimes you'll just lose. Like there's that teamwork aspect that's involved, and that can sometimes make the like somewhat helpless games already feel bad as is. So like having killers like Nurse around that makes it even more helpless can definitely be like kind of rough. And I think that's maybe something that's important to keep in mind. So I think it should be maybe toned down a little. But again, I really don't think it's that bad to have Nurse in the game as is right now. I guess the real alternative to all this is probably just reworking Nurse from the ground up. I think that's probably what actually needs to happen at some point, because I don't really think there's any way to actually balance her in a way that makes her like not overpowered. Because like I said, even if they do all the changes that I said to do in this video, like if they do like the like removing the basic attacks and nerfing her range add-ons, even if they do all that stuff, she's still gonna be the top killer in the game. She's still gonna be the best killer probably by far, and like nothing is really gonna change that aside from literally a full rework where they basically just make her do a completely something other than teleporting through walls, which realistically is probably not going to happen. We're probably going to be stuck with this Nurse for a very, very long time, maybe possibly forever. So I think we should probably just try to make the best of it and try to make her work whatever way we can. But hey, I don't know. If you guys have any other suggestions that you think can be done, feel free to let me know. I'd love to hear them in the comments. I think that pretty much very quickly covers my thoughts. I don't want to rant about this too long. I don't want to turn this into like a 20-minute video like I tend to do. That's just like a quick breakdown. I think she is OP. She can definitely be nerfed a bit, but I also think it's okay to have killers that are OP. You know, let killers, just like let killers have some wins sometimes, man. I don't know, dude. I honestly, I think they need it from time to time, if I'm gonna be real. That's it, guys. That's it for me. I don't know what else there is to say. Thank you guys for watching. Like the video if you guys liked it. Sub too if you want. It's fine. I'm gonna get out of here. Until next time, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I'm out of here. See ya. I'll take care. See ya. See you later. See ya.